So, as I was saying, this is the last part of Women Do the Damn Thing. I love, love, love the guests that we have for this ending episode of the series. Before we get into speaking about them, though, we want to give a special shout out. Women's Theater Festival is kind of part of the origin story for Theater's Not Dead. It's given me the platform and a lot of resources to get this show out of my head and into your computers. And they are having their games giving today. So that is all day long. They're playing games on their Facebook page, raising some money for an awesome nonprofit that is dedicated to gender equity. And speaking of women doing the damn thing, so is Women's Theater Festival. So check out all of their social media. It is in the description. And yes, support them like they support me. I don't know why I winked there, but it happened and now it's canon. On to our guests. Today, I'm so happy to be talking to Rebecca Jackson-Artis and Jessica Flemming. Rebecca Jackson-Artis is an award-winning actor, writer, podcaster, and producer. For over 20 years, Rebecca has been an advocate for putting diverse Black stories on stage and screen. Jessica Flemming is an actor, singer, stage manager, and theater educator. She also has a lot of accolades with different theaters, particularly in the North Carolina area. We'll hear more from her about that in a minute. Okay, everyone. Here they are. Are we ready? Welcome, Jessica and Rebecca. Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
I fangirl a lot on the show. I just want everyone to have a fair warning that the fangirling is going to continue today because I love these two individuals so much, both personally and as creatives. Speaking of creating stuff, hi, you're both theater makers. How'd you get started doing that?
I'll go first. So I started doing theater when I was about 8 or 9. I was lucky enough to live in an area that had a really robust youth theater program and youth theater education program. So between acting out movies in my living room and doing actual constructive theater making as a young person, that's kind of where it got started. And I kept through that all through high school and into college, and have kind of in the last couple of years, I think, really found the things that I'm excited to make and put my stamp on.
I have to tell you, like, literally my first memory as a child was I grew up in Chicago, and I remember walking into a my dad loved high-end restaurants. And I remember walking into this one restaurant and they had sequins all on the wall you could tell an artist created like a mural in sequins in this restaurant. And I remember walking in, I was little, because I don't, it's very foggy. And I remember looking at that and telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, one day my name is going to be in lights like that. And I have always wanted, and my mom remembers, and I remember it. It was very, very profound. And so my whole life, the only thing I ever envisioned for myself as my top professional goal was to perform on stage. And so at the age of 4, I started with violin. By 8, I was doing piano. I had played concert piano. I had done all that stuff. And my parents inundated me with the arts, like from visual arts to performing arts. And so one day my mom picked me up from school. My mother was a Chicago public school teacher. My dad was an evil banker for the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And so I grew up with money. Like, I didn't grow up, I grew up like, if I said I wanted to do something, my parents were like, okay, let's do it, But my parents always knew I was an artistic, creative kid. And I have to say, I was blessed with Black parents who were like, do it. Like they weren't that Black parents like, no, you got to get an engineering degree, make six figures. Like they weren't like that. They were like, hey, if you want to be, you know, in a studio and an unpermitted studio apartment somewhere, you know, and paint on the walls, please, we're here to support you. And so one day my mom picked me up from school. I think I was like in sixth. And one of my mom's Jewish friends told her, she's like, you know, Rebecca she's such a performer. I think you should sign her up for acting classes. And my mom picked me up. She's like, you know, Shelly says I should sign you up for acting classes. I was like, yes, Mom, yes, yes. So I started with Piven Theater Workshop when I was like 7th or 8th grade. That's Jeremy Piven's parents, Joyce and Bern Piven. I studied under them. And I studied classical, you know, Meisner and Stanislavski. And then I went to high school, studied under Dina Martin, who was amazing. And then I went to college thinking I was going to be an engineering major. My parents were like, no, you're not. And then, so I ended up changing my major to theater at Hampton University. And I got my degree in theater. And I just knew like, that was it. Like, that was all I wanted to ever do. And that's what I've been doing.
I know, particularly for Rebecca, that your parents, particularly your dad, played a huge role in the type of theater maker you grew up to be. Which reminds me that, like, I would love to hear both of your experiences with what type of support did your community give you, did your family give you to pursue a career in the arts? From my own personal experience, my family was kind of just like, oh no, honey, like colored people being artists means you're going to be poor your whole life. Like they were like, oh, you're such a great performer. Go into law.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, like, my parents, like I said, were very atypical Black parents from the 70s and 80s. Okay. So my parents wanted me to be a professional artist, right? Like, I remember days where my dad, like, I would, because, you know, as an art, like, right out of college, I got my degree, and I was like, I had to build my resume, my acting resume, right? And like, you know, I had some things on my resume, but it wasn't gonna get me anything but substance that would pay rent. So I'm an AKA also. And so I had some of my sorority sisters like, girl, I can hook you up with a teaching job. I can hook you up with a paralegal job. So I always had like little gigs, right? Thanks to my sorors. And so there was one time I was a paralegal, a contract paralegal for one of Kirkland and Ellis, the top evil law firm of the world. And I was working like 90 hours a week. Like literally, I would leave the firm at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, take the train back to my apartment, shower, take an hour nap, get back on the train, be back at the firm at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? Especially because we were doing big cases, like the United bankruptcy case and stuff like that, and Enron. So like I was working that hard. And I remember my dad, who worked downtown too, and we would meet for lunch, and he would say, Rebecca, this is not what you want to do. You want to perform. Why are you giving this law firm all your time and your energy and your talent? You need to perform. I'm like, but Dad, I'm making great money. Like, this is amazing. But I eventually took his advice, especially after my dad passed away in November 2003. And I really started to say, you know what? And my dad had this attitude, like, if you love something enough and you work really diligently, I didn't say hard, because you don't have to work hard. That's where people get confused. If you're very diligent and very strategic in what you're doing, you can always earn enough money to sustain your life. And so I was blessed with that. Now, my mother, on the other hand, she was the creative type. So she was more like, oh yeah, Rebecca, do what you got to do so you can be really creative, but make sure you have benefits, right? You know, like make sure you have medical and dental. That's all I wanted. Like, I want to make sure you have medical and dental. And, you know, my dad was like, F medical and dental, do what you gotta do, you know? And so but in that, like I had the support. However, and I will say this, outside of my parents, and I'm probably gonna tick a lot of people out, because actually I told my cousins before I got on, I was like, oh, come on, I'm about to be on this, so they're probably gonna see it. But outside of my family, I didn't get that much support, you know? They rarely came to my shows. They rarely asked what I did. I bet you if you ask a lot of my relatives what I do, by the way, I'm an only child. So like if you ask a lot of my cousins, like my cousins are like my sisters and brothers, right? If you ask a lot, like, well, what does Rebecca do? They'll be like, I think she acts or something. Like, like they wouldn't really know. They know that I make films. They know that I perform, but they don't really know my work. I've had some cousins that donate to my projects, and some of them that they definitely know. But the majority of my family really would love for me to just teach, get benefits, have a pension, and shut up. And that's the reality of it. Family typically doesn't support your work. And if you're an artist, I just want to let you know, like, it doesn't mean your family's weird or mean. That's just a typical thing across the board.
Jessica, I saw you nodding a couple of times. How is your support system as a newly created creator? Wow, that was a horrible way to phrase that question.
I got you. I mean, growing up, again, like similar to Rebecca, like, from the jump, I was into things, doing things. I also had like my mom specifically, who was just like, well, if it's you want to do it, let's try it. And if it sticks, it doesn't. If you don't like it, you can quit. So I was really lucky that, my mom was very like, if it makes me happy, sure, why not? And I think for like the rest of my immediate family, it's not that they were as supportive as they could be about a thing they didn't understand. Where it's just like, she seems to be having a good time and, we'll see where it goes. And I think with other aspects of my life, I've kind of proven that especially as a younger person, like I was very independent and I was really stubborn. So they're like, she'll be fine, I guess. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, like family and friends who I had outside of creative circles, yeah, that's like they're as supportive as they can be while not really understanding. It's the same thing kind of with like friends who are doctors. I'm just like, I've seen doctors. I've met them a couple times, but I'm like, I don't know what it's like to go there. Like, I don't know what it's like to live that life and do that thing. So but like, people will come to my shows and that was the thing. Like when I had friends growing up or after I kind of got a little older, they're like, do you have like, what's your show go? Like, you want to come to my show? I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what the show is. Okay. I'm happy to let people know. But yeah, there is kind of a curve with if you don't have a family that is performers or you don't have a family that does any sort of thing that is very like putting it out there, / families that will show up to everything. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get a very close bubble, to come to see things. And I'm sure some of that has to do with, family dynamic and what that all means. And, some families show their support monetarily. Some families show their support by, showing up to the things. Some show their support by not showing up because they're going to be real crappy about it.
Yeah, and I was going to say that I've had relatives come to my shows and later on they're like, you know what, Becky, I just didn't understand that joke that you made. Like, what was that about? And I'm just like, okay. And everybody else gets it, right? And I'm just like, okay, yeah, we won't go there.
My family was very much like a bingo card is the metaphor I'm going to run with here, where slowly but surely everyone has seen one thing, right? Like, okay, she's been doing this for about 4 years. I guess I'll see a thing. So we like started ticking them off the box, and depending on the show that they came to see, they're either like, I guess that's cool, or they're like, no, go into accounting. So, and I guess a lot of my question was coming from like, is that a Black thing? That like, we are always so hesitant to let our children have career paths that are not the American dream version of a career, lawyer, doctor, accountant, that sort of stuff. Like the idea, we want you to have a pension and benefits, right? Like we want you to be in these positions so we know you're taken care of. financially. I don't see that for a lot of my white peers, where their parents are like, no, you can't have a job that's gig based or freelance based. And they're like, go, essentially Rebecca's parents, where they're like, go forth and be as artistic as you want to be. I don't know. I was just tossing that out there.
Think it's well, first of all, I think it's not just a Black thing. I think it's a person of color thing, because I've heard my Asian friends say the same thing about their family. They're like, you want to go around and play the guitar in bars? What? Okay, so like that, and also I think among white people, I think it's a middle to upper class thing. Well, I think poor white people would tell their kids, oh, hell no, you're not going to be a professional comedian. You're going to go and you're going to get this steel mill job and you're going to work it out and you're going to come home with dirty hands, stinking and tired, right? Because you got to help with the farm or the mortgage or whatever, right? And I really think that's how I see it. I see it's a class thing among white people. Now, white people. But when you go outside of white people, it's just a person of color thing. They're just like, honey, you're stressing me out right now that you're sitting here telling me you want to be a professional artist. But I think, and that's why that's where I respect artists of color way more than white artists, because we had to go through a ton of hoops with our family, with our friends, with our community. And then on top of that, we have to go through hoops professionally. So, so then we're able to still sustain ourselves and still continue to do work. Like I want to work with you. I don't care what work you're doing. I want to work with you. I want to know your work and I want to support your work because you've been through a lot.
I was going to say too, kind of, I think it comes to a culture. This might be getting way too deep and not at all theater related. There is this kind of culture of, in some people, and I've seen this kind of across the board with however people identify this, I suffered, so you have to suffer too. Like, that's what makes you tough. That's what makes you worthy. That's what makes you a hard worker. And by doing something that is fun and like that is lifting of the spirit, that isn't just working that 9 to 5, working that grind for that dollar for the rent, but something that is what makes you a whole person, that makes you interesting and like lights a fire inside of you. I think some people view that as like, you don't get to cheat the system. You don't get to be a full rounded person. Like, I had to work this and I had to give up on my dreams for my job and my kids and my family. Why should you get that from the jump? That is the opinion that I have received or kind of perceived from a lot of people, of just like, no, you can't have a good time. That's not what this is about. You're going to work hard till you're like 45, 50, 60, then you can retire and then you can be an exciting person. But by that point, what do you have? If you spent your whole life not doing the things that make you happy or not doing the things that spark any sort of interest and fire inside of you.
Which I'm going to go ahead and just commit to the rabbit hole we're currently going into. I think that is so fascinating of a perspective about like, you have to work just as hard and be just as miserable as I was at your age. Rebecca and I have talked about this in another conversation, this idea of romanticizing the struggle, right? Where like you haven't experienced the full Black experience until you've had that struggle, until you've had to like be miserable and work in a tasteless job that you don't care for. And it's like, I'm going to disagree with that. I see it so often, especially in all of these quote unquote motivational movies where we get to watch particularly a Black woman have to go through terrific and horrific obstacles in order to achieve some sort of goal or the civil rights that she should have had in the first damn place. Are those stories important? Sure, but at the same time, it's very much that romanticization of, or that glorification of Black women always have to be strong and always have to overcome. and can't be seen as weak. Which,
Or we have to be magical. That's another thing. We have to be magical. We have to be, we are almost kind of like elves, big, fat, funny elves. I remember when I was living in LA, I was taking an on-camera class, and this white guy who's amazing, great director, great instructor, awesome. He kept telling me, he was like, Rebecca, you need to be a comedian. And I was just like, no, I'm not a comedian. I have years of classical acting training, please, darling, please. No. And he's like, Rebecca, you are naturally funny. You're naturally funny. You need to, and I appreciated him because he did pull me aside one time after class and he said, Rebecca, don't resist who you really are. So I was like, okay. But then when I did finally go, okay, I'm funny, right? I'm gonna be funny. I'm gonna do funny stuff. Because I'd been doing improvisation. By this time I'd been, understudy at Second City, blah, blah, blah. And I had started to gain some weight. This was like maybe a year or so into doing comedy. And I remember a white guy, this is another white guy. I was at a comedy club and he said, oh, now Rebecca, because I used to be a little cute shape in my 20s, but this is now I'm older, more gay weight. He was like, oh, now you're the typical funny big Black girl now. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm done with comedy. I'm done. Because I don't want to be the funny big Black girl anymore. The one that laughs at, sex joke or make people laugh at sex jokes or, talking about my roles and, skinny girls, right? That's not me. I'm very intellectual with my comedy. And for a long time, white people got it. They understood it. Black people didn't. And I have to admit that right now. As much as I love my Black people, I don't like saying nothing negative about Black people, especially when white people are listening. But I will say Black people had a tough time with my original comedy, which was very intellectual, very political comedy. And I purposely stayed away from sex jokes. I purposely stayed away from, ghetto jokes. That was not me. I wanted to keep it very intellectual. So I would get invited more to white comedy clubs than I would Black. But then what I did is I stepped away and I was like, no, I'm going to continue this, right? I'm going to force this type of comedy on people. But what I want to say is like white people, they got my comedy, but they would always try to make me gear toward, well, Rebecca, you should tell something about growing up in the hood. I didn't grow up in the hood, so I don't know anything about that. Or Rebecca, you should say something about, you and your husband in the bed. And I'm like, no, I don't want to share that about my husband. Like, I don't ever want, like, if I talk about my husband, it's going to be talking about how great of a Black man he is. And, how you white people attack him because he's great. Right. But they never, so it was always, I found out like every time I would get off the stage, it was like, oh my God, you're so funny. But maybe next time if you do this with the joke, and I'm like, mm-hmm. And I tried to steer it toward like, were the comments for me being better or were the comments trying to make me into a box, right? And so I learned the more I did it, like how to cipher it. But yeah, you're right. Like there is this real push. And we've talked about it, Keyanna, there's this real push about Black people have to appear struggling. And as much as I love, I love historical dramas. I love it. My husband has his degrees in history, especially African-American history. I love it. However, we've got to be conscious of the fact that when you see images over and over and over and over and over and over again, it becomes you. Right? Whether you want to say, oh, no, oh, that would never, oh, no, I could watch anything. And oh, I could never, that will never be put on me. Oh, no, I'm not, I'm telling you, the brain, your eyes, your ears, and your brain are very powerful. And when you see things over and over and over again, you start adopting that mentality and that lifestyle. So we've got to be very conscious as Black creators to create content I think some of us are too far gone. So some of us just got to die off. So we ain't creating content for those people. But some of us, we are creating content for people who are still open for change, for evolution, for healing, and for building empires, right? And so, and in our young minds. And we have to be very conscious about the things that we're doing. And that's why I really am pushing a lot of my students. I'm really pushing a lot of people who come to me for mentorship. I'm pushing them to write Afrofuturism. Like, we really need to see ourselves. Where are we going to be in, 3,220, right? Where are we going to be? And we really need to talk about that. And instead of having one Black person on the spaceship, why can't we have a whole fleet of spaceships full of Black people? Ain't no white folks on them. And that's probably going to be the reality with the way biology works.
Okay, I'm actually really glad that you said one of the trigger phrases. Ooh, I'm not going to call it trigger phrases, but content creation was one of the questions I really wanted to dive into with the two of you, especially in regards to like, yikes, we're in a pandemic, and yet both of you are still doing things and are still active in making of theater. So one, how's that working out for you? And then I also really, really want to talk about how do we continue to shift the focus of our work to be about uplifting Black voices instead of perpetuating the struggle. So those are my two questions. You can tackle either one that you want first, but particularly for Jessica, hey, how's the pandemic treating you as a creative?
I mean, it's one of these things where rational, logical Jessica talking to other people is like, I'm just happy that I have something to do. But real artist, selfish Jessica is like, but it's kind of BS because I do not do well talking to a computer screen. I'm like, no, I'm an actor. I interact with people. I have people skills. And it is very difficult for me as somebody who is like dedicated my life to not sitting in front of a computer working, to have my work suddenly become sitting in front of a computer working. But again, I like when I like have to stop being a poopy pants for a minute and be like, recognize the fact that like you have been busy and doing creative projects for the last 8-9 months now, that is a gift and that is a testament to the work that I have been doing, that people still want to keep working with me. And I think one of the things that I hope that comes out of this, I've seen a lot of people doing we just got to make it work, and who cares because it's a reading, or who cares because, we just want to do something for fun. I've had the opportunity to read and play roles that I would never traditionally be cast as, despite the fact that I am the romantic male lead that nobody casts. Like, I'm really good at that, but I will never be cast at that in those roles because I'm a gigantic Black woman. But I can make anyone look tiny and demure, so I don't see what the problem is. So it's been this thing that I hope people can kind of like take out of this, of just like, maybe, open up your idea of what characters can be. And that's kind of like the challenge that I want to like put forward to people, is just like this. And I guess this kind of gets at a thing of like the theater that I want to do, the theater that I'm excited about, and the stories that I want to tell are just good human stories. And what makes the connection for me is having a story that is compelling and interesting, and that the person who is telling the story, like the lens doesn't have to be like, we need to make this a Black story, we need to make this an LGBTQ story, we need to make this a first generation immigrant story. It's like, just have the person be that thing and tell the story, and that is what makes it universal. I mean, it is important. I think that is one way to uplift people, is just like, just put people in stories. All sorts of people in stories, different types of people communicating. And that is one way to kind of take this kind of like, how do we get people of color on stage? How do we get people of color in the writing room? Invite them. You don't get to have a seat at the table because they do. Like, that's all it has to be. And I think there's some of the ego that people have to kind of let go of. primarily in a lot of these kind of classical institutions and these institutions that exist, which are primarily white people. It's like, yeah, you might not get a shot because you continue to get shots, and other people have just been waiting politely on the sideline to play the quirky black best friend or the mystical fairy creature in your Shakespeare because you don't know where else to put her. Like, that's just me putting my feelings out on the table about my life experience. But yeah, I think that I would really hope that this time has allowed people to, especially creative people, to focus on the things they do want to do, the things they don't want to do, and how they can really kind of insert themselves into the creative life they want to live.
Oh, and you make me want to live my best creative life now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also just want to give a special shout out. Someone in the comments said, "Oh, Jessica, you're not a poopy pants." So, just wanted to validate you and let you know that you're not. It's okay.
Everyone gets a chance to be a poopy pants. It's a.
But yeah, I can't agree more with all of that. But I think there is a certain level of like, we disguise a lot of these white stories as universal, right? Like we could argue a lot of these quote unquote universal stories, and we're including everyone. Well, because that show doesn't talk about race and doesn't talk about gender identity or whatever the case may be for whatever demographic we're talking about today, right? Like, that means it's probably going to go to someone who doesn't fit into a marginalized demographic. Just because, like, oh, well, yeah, that character could just be someone's white guy neighbor who's that perfect 25 to 32 age range and could play literally anything. We're going to give it to that guy now because the role doesn't say it has to be black. The role doesn't say it has to be transgender. So, yes to universal stories, and it doesn't always have to be about blackness or be about marginalizing people. But we need to kind of swing the pendulum a little bit so that we start getting that equal ground in just the amount of works featuring people.
I think to Rebecca's point, it's like the stories you see and the people who tell those stories will dictate how your brain associates these things. And it's like, if you only ever see, people get stuck in their little habits, it's like, well, break the habit. It's like find, like, you could, like, how transformative it can be to, like, okay, you have this role that you have this picture in your mind. It's like, okay, well, what happens if you audition somebody or read somebody who is the exact opposite of that? What insights can you get, or what you perceive to be the opposite of that person? It's just like, what happens when you do have someone who is female identifying read a male role? What do you learn about that person and that role? And just because and I mean, I'm not a writer, so I can't speak from the perspective of like keeping the sanctity of your writing as it's been presented. But like, I think there is something about adding more diverse types of people into the orbit and creating space for that, and then seeing what that does to transform whatever your work is.
Yeah, I think that's very important as a writer. I shouldn't say I think, I know that's very important as a writer. We as writers have to write in this role, and I do it. I'm very specific because I'm studying August Wilson, which white people love August Wilson. And I'm not saying like August Wilson, great Black guy, amazing. Shay, thank you. My uncle was friends with him. Get it? Totally get it, right? However, oh my God, there's so many other Black playwrights. Oh my God. And sometimes I just get so frustrated with white people. Like they do the same thing. Lorraine Hansberry, August Wilson, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, do you know anybody else? Right? Do you know Darren Kennedy? No, you don't. You know, do you know Carla Stillwell? No, you don't. You know, I mean, it's just so, I mean, the list goes on and on. But anyway, but that's something that is very important for Black writers that we need to put in when we write our characters. Needs to be played only by an amputee, right? Only an authentic amputee needs to play this role and be serious, right? It should, you know, this role should only be played by a transgender person, period. And that's what I learned from August Wilson. You know, in his will, he said, if a white person plays any of these roles, I'm gonna come out of the grave and haunt that theater company, right? And he specifically said that. He was like, do not blind cast my roles. These, I wrote them for Black people, only Black people, about Black people, by Black people, for Black people. It's going to be a Black show. And he put it in there. And I love his family for honoring his work, because when you produce his work, they make sure how many Black people are working on this project, right? And so that's very important as writers. So we have to understand, and this is very important. And as white people are very good. I give white people a ton of credit for being very strategic, and very, you know, they see the future. That they are carving out a section for themselves in the future, right? And when white people write or create or do things, or even when it comes to like finance or whatever, they make sure they let people know for the future, this is how we want to have it done. Right? Before they release it publicly, they make sure they get it locked down, right? Through copyright, through their agents and managers and wills and whatever, and estate planning. They make sure it's in there. Black people, we need to be more strategic. We need to go, okay, well, wait, before I let this go, excuse me. Anyway, before I let this go out in public, I want to make sure that you guys are honoring my vision, my intention, and my purpose. And that's what we need to start writing things down. And we need to be unapologetic about it. Like, you guys, and you know this, Keyanna, I give zero craps about hurting white people's feelings. I don't care. I mean, if anything, I love hurting white people's feelings. Like, I'm like, oh, good. Oh, yes, I made them uncomfortable. I pissed them off. Yes. Because it lets me know that my work is doing something. Because if I don't piss white people off, that means there is going to be, I have done something that does not affect any change, right? I'd rather be uninvited to white people's spaces. When white people bring me in more and more, I'm like, oh Lord, I'm the approved Negro now. What did I do wrong, right? But when white people start going, I don't want Rebecca around. I don't like her. She's difficult. She's mean. She make me feel uncomfortable. I'm like, yes, I did my part. And if more more Black people in theater did that, oh my gosh, just imagine the work that we would produce. If we stop caring about white folks, like zero care, we didn't care about the funding, we didn't care about the producers, we didn't care about the stages that we produced on, we just did the work. And we did it authentically, and we did it with the passion and the fire and the anger. And by the way, Black people, there's nothing wrong with being angry. That's something that Black people also have to work on. We have to be like okay with being angry. It's how we use our anger, right? And so we did all that, and we poured that into our theater work. Oh my gosh, just imagine the work that would be produced across this country. Woo! I'm excited. I'm excited for Black people to shed the white, their Europeanized fear. I am so excited because it's happening. Even some of my friends were like, oh yeah, they'll say things. I'm like, what, you? Ooh, you love kissing pink butt. What? And so now you are not, what? Go ahead, do what you got to do. And I'm starting to like that. This is amazing.
I had a real quick anecdote. I'm not going to name the theater, but it is on social media. If anyone actually wants to just do a quick Google search. There was a production of The Mountaintop, and anyone who's familiar with that script knows that one of the characters is the late and great Martin Luther King Jr. And it was played based on Jessica's face. She either knows the story or she can guess.
Oh, I know where this is going.
It was played by a white man. And when people asked, why in the world would you do this? Why would you cast a white man in this role? The theater released a statement, something along the lines to, well, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. is a American icon, is a American symbol, and any American should be able to embody him.
That's a real nice way of saying they don't know any black people.
And you know what also that's a real nice way of saying? F you, black people. We give zero cares about you. And we don't see you. We don't care about you so much that you don't even exist in our eyes.
And I love especially in that particular instance of choosing Martin Luther King, who was not liked by white people and not liked by most black people at the time either. That suddenly it's like people especially love. I have a January birthday, so it's usually around Martin Luther King Day. People love to start quoting Martin Luther King and be like, all right, well, what else are you doing to support black people? Because y'all love to throw around these few quotes. Because towards the end, he was talking about, helping unions and lifting all sorts of people up. And the worst thing
talking about the black dollar and telling black people to uninvest in white banks and to create their own banks and create their own economic system and to turn their back on the government to the point that Lyndon B. Johnson sent him a letter, which has never been done in history. Lyndon B. Johnson sent Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. a letter to disinvite him from the White House. No other person in the history of the United States has ever received a letter such as that from the president.
I think that's probably one of the greatest flexes of all time, though. Talking about, you're doing your job right if you make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Greatest flex.
And I love how white people love to quote him. But they don't realize why the American government shot and killed him. Hoover shot and killed King. And let's just call it out where it is, because we all know it happened. We know the U.S. government, hired an assassin to kill the brother. We all know that. Don't be stupid, right? It happens all the time. They did it to Malcolm. They did it to Medgar Evers. They did it to everybody, right? So let's just call it out. Why does the U.S. government, the FBI, target black people to the point that they have files this wide, right? Why do they stalk people? Why do they constantly, Coretta Scott King said there was calls over and over and over and over and over again to their house. People were walking in front of their house, all the time. Why? We got to ask this. So all you white people that love to quote Martin Luther King, you were part of the problem. And if you really knew what King was doing, you wouldn't like him either. And you only select the nice little white approved part that you guys like. And the only reason why he was white approved for so long is because he was talking that nonviolent mess. White people love when black people talk about, oh, wait, no, let's come together. Let's be peaceful. Let's talk. Oh, let's educate. White people love that, right? But as soon as black people be like, F you, I ain't got time to educate you. I only talk to people who are my equals. Right? I only talk to people who are my equals. I don't educate people. I talk to people who are my equals. And on top of it, if you mess with me, I have a conceal and carry permit. Okay, I have a conceal and carry permit. If you mess with me, understand that. And it took me a long time to get to that point, ladies. It took me a long time. Because I was there. I wanted to, and I have to admit, I still had that Europeanized fear. Like I was like, I want to get in this theater company. So I'm gonna be real nice. I'm gonna play well, you don't get a raise, Rebecca, but I'm doing everything else all the other ensemble members are doing. Right? Rehearsal, doing the arts education classes, helping them fundraise, doing everything else. White people came in after me, getting raises, right? Getting bonuses, And I'm like, oh, sorry, excuse me. Helena Kays. Why, and we don't have it in our budget. Oh, Rebecca, well, you have to qualify. And it took a while. I'm slow. There are times I was formula fed, so sometimes I'm slow, right? I didn't get breast milk. So sometimes it takes a while for me to get, I'm like, so it's not about the work that I'm not doing. It's not about the budget. It's the fact that I'm Black. And they don't see me. They don't see me. They don't honor me. They don't care. I could disappear tomorrow, as we've seen a lot of Black women do. And no acknowledgement of it, right? So that is why, Keyanna, I'm glad you brought it up. But this is where we as Black people, specifically as Black women, because Black women, we run the world, and let's just be honest, we are the cradle of civilization. And so that's why now Hollywood and Broadway and all that, like, oh, we want more Black women stories, because they realize there's power in our voices, right? But here's the thing, ladies, we've got to stop giving energy to dumb white folks. We've got to stop it. And Goodman Theater in Chicago did a reverse casting of Othello. They put a white woman, and I'm not, because Keyanna, I curse too, so I'm trying to make this G-rated.
Oh, don't worry. The title of the show is Women Doing the Damn Thing.
Okay, so I agree. So they put a white ass woman play Othello. And I remember this happened, I want to say this happened in 2010 or 2011. And Goodman, they're Goodman, and they had the nerve to respond with, well, this is what we're going to do. And a lot of the Black actors, actors that probably you guys, world-renowned Black actors who are Chicago theater actors, came together, and they had this like forum, and they were going to talk to the Goodman Theater administration. And you know what the Goodman Theater administration did? This is how they don't care about us. They took their little approved shucking and jiving Negroes, and they put them on that panel. The white administrators didn't even show up. And they put them on that panel, and as soon as you showed up, you knew exactly what was about to happen. You had the Black people going, well, we don't see a problem with it. And when white people have that Black person, they go, we don't see a problem with it. That's when they're like, see, we're fine. And we're going to continue to be racist and have cognitive dissonance, right?
Jessica, you're making so many faces.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm agreeing and listening.
But I'm going to say this, but this is the problem. And this is why, one, we need to ignore dumb white people. Okay. That theater company, wherever they are, and I would call them out because I know you don't want to, but I call them out. Wherever they are, they don't exist. And if I have any power of any funding or any way that they're not going to get it. I will block. That's one thing white people will answer to. When you block their money, white people will listen. They don't care about how Black people feel. They don't care how we feel. When I had one of my theater friends, she was having a problem at a very top-rated theater school university. I'm not going to name, but it's a very, very high-ranking university with high-ranking theater program. She was teaching there, and there was some racism going on among the faculty. And she came to me, she's like, Rebecca, how do I approach my dean, right? And I said, don't tell him how you feel. White people cannot stand to hear Black people's feelings. It's a repellent for them. And they're like, oh my God, right? But let that dean know how you can block funding for the department. Let that dean know how you can easily make a phone call and change the reputation, and you have a PR department who's backing you. Let you say that. Then, okay, let's listen. Okay, how can we help you? And sure enough, that's what she did. She went, she sat down. And when she did those two things, I know media and I know how to block funding because I bring in a certain amount of funding. So if I leave, I take that funding with me to another university. And when those two things were stated, then all of a sudden she's now honored and heard. So as Black people, we have to do that. Black theater companies who are stupid, white theater companies who are stupid. And we also have to know that there are Black people in this industry who are shuck and jiving, and they love white people more than they love themselves. And we have to let them go. We have to go, you know what, you're collateral. Bye. I will not work with you. When you are ready to look in the mirror and love yourself, give me a call. But in the meantime, I cannot work with you because you're dangerous. You are the brother who told on us when we were making a plan to escape the plantation. And I can't have you in my space. And once Black people get that and we get those rules and we set those boundaries, again, I'm going to be very excited about what theater is going to be produced.
Speaking about future theater, we have time for like one last quick question, and it's kind of a big one, so sorry that we have limited time to answer it. The future...
Okay, I'm not going to say anything. Justin's all you from now on. The 42-year-old is going to shut up.
Well, everything that you're saying is so good. It's just we only have so much time. Friends,
No.
Virtual theater in 2020 has been a thing. Both of you have tried it out, have dipped your toes in the water. Mm-hmm. Do we see this continuing on in the future? Does this have merit and benefits, particularly for colored artists, to continue to pursue?
I mean, I think there's definitely... I think most theater people are ready to get back into creative spaces with real life human people to make things. But I think there is definitely something about the accessibility that is allowed in this sort of platform that all you need is a script and a laptop and internet connection, which I recognize is a pretty big privilege. But it takes out some of the, do you got kids? Do you got someone in your house you need to take care of? Do you have a job that you can really only get away for so much time? And these have been barriers for a lot of people, especially creatives, especially women, doing this work, that, maybe there can be more of this thing where people don't have to have the commitment of driving 45 minutes to a rehearsal, having a 3, 4, 5 hour rehearsal, coming back home, still doing all your other life stuff. So yeah, I think there's definitely room for it in the future. I think why not have both? Why not have it all?
This is where I show my age. I still think I'm 26, by the way. I feel like there are times I wake up and I'm like, yeah, I'm 26.
Aren't you though?
I'm telling you, I really feel like somebody lied to me and told me my wrong birthday a long time ago. But no, I think that what is happening is when you're making theater virtual, you're really creating a television show. I mean, because that's what television is. It's a soundstage, which is the theater, right? And people are acting in front of a camera, and it's being fed into a screen. So then where is performing in hundreds of theatrical shows throughout these years, from the time I was in 7th grade to now? I can tell you, maybe not hundreds. I wanted to make myself more important. Maybe it's just a few. But anyway, but I have to say, there's something about smelling that audience, right? Every actor knows what I'm saying. Every theatrical actor understands what I'm saying, right? When you go to that stage and you're in rehearsal and you say something and there's a bouncing off of your voice, right? And that stage and putting your feet on the stage, it's a very spiritual experience for many actors, right? And then the nights where the audience fills the house and you go out and you do those same lines and that same performance in your costume and you feel where where your voice is going out and it's being absorbed by the skin and the hair and the clothes of the people who are sitting there. And you hear the coughing and you hear the rustling of the candy and you hear like, you hear the, oh, what? I mean, just it, like, just, I mean, you guys, I mean, like, it does something to, it's a high. It's a high. And it's something that as actors, that is our food. That is our spiritual, that is our communion, right? And if we don't get that, many of us actors, and a lot of my actor friends are going through this right now. They're sinking into a deep clinical depression. And it's something that is very scary right now. And I get it. Virtual theater is like, well, if we can't do, at least we're doing some performance. Great, honor it. That's where I'm like, bravo, let's keep doing it. Great, right? But then there's a portion of it where some of us theatrical actors who are rooted in, even though I still do film and television, and I love that art, I love it, but I have to go into a theater every now and then. I have to perform. I have to feel that. I have to smell that audience. I have to feel that absorption. I have to hear the rustling of things, right? I have to get that live reaction and have the different ways I perform. That's very important for me. And that is our medicine. And if we don't get that as actors, I'm telling you, you're going to see a lot of artists transition.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's very scary for me.
When I had so cycling back to the top of our conversation, when my family was like, oh, I guess she's gonna do this whole actor thing, they're like, oh, well, all the money's in Hollywood, so now you're gonna act for film and not the stage. And my argument to them was always, I have to do theater because I know for myself I need immediate gratification. So if I say a joke, I need someone to laugh at it. If I start crying on stage, I need someone to gasp, right? Like, I just need that energy, that exact same thing Rebecca's talking about as I perform, because it replenishes my cup as I am pouring myself out every night during my performance. So I just want to say, I do miss the stage. I'm a huge advocate for virtual theater. I think it has a lot of benefits, especially that access for both actors who maybe can't afford or do not have the time to do in-person stuff, but also from the audience perspective, those people who can't sit in a dark room for 2.5 hours, those people who can't be restricted to a chair for an extended amount of time. I think there's so much benefits to virtual theater, but hi, internet, can someone just like sound splice Rebecca talking about the theater experience? Because that was so beautiful, and it reminded me it tossed in my face how much I truly miss being on stage and how much I truly miss that experience. We are at time. Wow, this has been so good. I love talking Blackness and Black creatives and content with you both. This has been... Oh, I'll let you guys open the floor. If there's any projects, any social media, anything that you want to plug real quick for our audience to follow you at. Jessica?
I have a project coming up that I closed all the information out of. On the internet somewhere, Brave New Classics is doing a production of the second Shepherd's play that has been adapted by Paul Sapp. That'll be on their Twitch channel. December 10th, 11th, and 12th. It is not your eighth grandfather's version of this story. It's a very beautiful, modern interpretation of a story that I enjoy, and it has a cast of kick-ass women telling a story that, and a guy, sorry, telling a story that I think is really interesting and timely.
Jessica? Wait, no. Jessica, we just talked to. Rebecca?
Well, everybody can see my web series, Totally Becky, on YouTube. Just look up Totally Becky, the web series. Right now, we just have 3 episodes up. Then the Rebecca Show our sketch comedy show with Rebecca Fox. This week, Rebecca got on me last week. I have to record, she's probably listening to this right now. I have to record our audio because we're going to animate, because of virtual theater, we're going to animate our show. And so we're going to become like these 2 little cartoons. And so so look out for that, probably January-ish. Anyway. And then you also know I have a podcast, Black Becky Speaks, that I am this week doing a ton of interviews myself, Keyanna. So I feel your pain right now. And it's mixing my political work, because I work with politicians too, and my sketch comedy work. And I've created these 5 Black women characters, very diverse Black women characters, because not all Black women think alike, and addressing political issues. And that will come out because Spotify and all these other people who have hands in this project with me, they're like, Rebecca, when is your project coming out? And I'm like, I'm going to do it. And then, of course, I'm always writing. So just always be on the lookout for that. But thank you. And you can follow me on Instagram, all the social medias, Rebecca Jackson-Artis.
All right, everybody. Well, this has been Jessica Flemming, Rebecca Jackson-Artis, talking about Black ladies doing the damn thing, living the best lives. We love to see it. Another kind reminder, Women's Theater Festival, friend of the show, supports me both personally and Theater's Not Dead and a lot of stuff. They are having their Giving Tuesday, so check out all their content. It's going until into the evening, so they're going to be doing stuff top of the hour, every hour until 7. So their stuff is in the description. Check them out. Check out Rebecca and Jessica's stuff. They're awesome. I didn't fangirl as much as I thought I would, just because we had such a good conversation. I was so invested in what you were saying.
Girl, if you understood what my farts smell like, you'd be like, honey, I am not your fan. Anything, I need a fan to get away from you. Girl, I'm vegan, and so you can just imagine what this process is.
Oh, Lord. Well, theater makers, we will catch you next time. This has been Keyanna Alexander, letting everybody know, yet again, heifers, theater's not dead. Catch you next time.